The family walked into their neighborhood grocery store on a warm Saturday afternoon, ready to pick up food for the week. The father, who worked as an FBI agent, pushed the shopping cart while keeping an eye on his spouse and two children. The children were excited, chatting about their favorite snacks and asking for treats as they moved down the aisles. The store was not crowded, but a few other shoppers were around, quietly picking up their items and moving through the aisles. Everything seemed normal, a simple routine Saturday shopping trip. As they reached the produce section, the father carefully selected fresh vegetables, checking each item for quality. His spouse examined the fruits nearby, making sure to choose the ripest ones. The children, thrilled to be helping, reached for bananas and apples, giggling as they placed them in the cart. Suddenly, two uniformed police officers appeared from around the corner. They walked quickly toward the family, their expressions serious and tense. The father noticed them immediately, sensing that something was off. The officers stopped near the cart, and one of them, without greeting or explanation, accused the family of acting suspiciously. The tone of the officer's voice was sharp, and it carried an edge of hostility that made the father tense up. The father, remaining calm, responded politely, asking what they meant and why they were being singled out. The officers didn't provide clear answers. Instead, they repeated the accusation and asked the father to identify himself and show identification. Shoppers nearby started to look over their shoulders, noticing the confrontation. Some whispered to each other, uncomfortable with what they were witnessing. The children, sensing the tension, clung to their parents. Their little hands gripped tightly and their eyes were wide with fear. The father spoke in a calm and steady voice, trying to reassure them while also trying to manage the situation. He knew any sudden move could escalate things. The officers stepped closer, their body language aggressive, trying to intimidate. The father noticed every movement, every word, every gesture. His FBI training made him aware of the potential danger, but also reminded him that composure was the key. He kept his voice calm, polite, but firm. He asked again for an explanation and tried to keep the conversation on facts rather than emotions. One of the officers seemed frustrated, their anger rising as the father did not respond in fear or panic. They looked around at the shoppers, who were now watching quietly but attentively. Some pulled out their phones, sensing that this encounter was not normal and might need to be recorded. The father made sure the children stayed close to him, positioning himself between them and the officers. His spouse gently took the younger child's hand and whispered reassuring words. Despite the tension, the father remained calm, aware that his actions would set the tone for the entire encounter. The officers, clearly unused to dealing with someone who did not react with fear, tried different tactics to intimidate. They asked more questions, repeated accusations, and moved closer to assert authority. The father continued to answer politely, refusing to give them any reason to escalate. Meanwhile, the other shoppers started to notice the unfairness of the situation. Some shook their heads, others whispered quietly. A few discreetly recorded the scene on their phones, making sure to stay out of the officer's way. The family could feel the tension in the air, the stares of strangers, and the hostility of the officers. Yet through it all, the father remained calm. He focused on keeping his family safe, keeping his voice steady, and making sure that every move was deliberate. The officers then demanded that the family move to a less crowded part of the store for questioning. The father refused politely, explaining that they were not doing anything wrong and that there was no reason to isolate them. The officers' frustration was visible, and their patience was clearly thinning. They exchanged short, tense words between themselves, trying to figure out how to handle a situation that was not going according to their plan. The father kept his composure, understanding that losing his cool could turn a difficult situation into a dangerous one. The children were frightened but remained close, sensing the father's calm as a source of reassurance. His spouse held their hands tightly, whispering words of comfort. The father slowly continued shopping, carefully selecting a few more items, all the while keeping an eye on the officers. He did not make sudden moves or aggressive gestures. Instead, he remained observant, noting details that could later help clarify what happened. His phone, quietly recording in his pocket, captured the interaction without drawing attention. As the officers continued to press, the father maintained his polite tone, asking once more for clarification. Their answers were vague, inconsistent, and full of hostility. The tension in the store was palpable. Other shoppers felt uncomfortable, some taking mental notes of what they were witnessing, understanding that the family was being unfairly targeted. The father's steady presence was a silent message that intimidation would not work. He subtly guided the family toward the checkout area, keeping a safe distance from the officers while still under their scrutiny. The children were scared, but they trusted their father and the calm way he handled the situation. They whispered questions, asking why the officers were being so mean. The father answered softly, explaining that sometimes people act unfairly, but it was important to stay calm and safe. The family continued moving, carefully avoiding any sudden actions that could be misinterpreted. The officers followed, still trying to assert authority, but unable to provoke a reaction from the father. Shoppers continued to watch quietly, some speaking softly to each other about the unfair treatment they were witnessing. The father's calm demeanor was a clear contrast to the officer's aggression. He continued to focus on facts, not feelings, and kept his family protected. Despite the fear and tension, he managed to project confidence and control, making it clear that intimidation would not succeed. Finally, the family approached the checkout area. The father calmly placed items on the counter, keeping an eye on the officers. They hovered nearby, frustrated that their attempts at intimidation were failing. The cashier, noticing the tension, remained polite and professional, helping the family with their purchases. Other shoppers in line were aware of the situation, some watching closely, others quietly recording with their phones. The father paid for the items calmly, completing the transaction without escalating the confrontation. As they exited the store, the officers continued to question them, but the father maintained his calm. He explained politely that they were leaving, and any further questioning should be done through proper channels. The officers watched them leave, their frustration obvious, but the father and his family remained composed. The children held tight to their parents, feeling a mixture of relief and lingering fear. The father reminded them to stay calm and to always trust their instincts in difficult situations. Once outside, the father took a deep breath and ensured the children were safe. He quietly noted down everything that happened, from the officers' words to their behavior, knowing that this record could be important later. The family walked to their car, still shaken but relieved to be out of the tense situation. The father reassured them that they had handled it the right way, staying safe and composed, and that any further action would be taken in a careful and strategic manner. The family drove home quietly, reflecting on the encounter. The children were still processing what had happened, but they felt safe because their parents had remained calm and protective. The father, thinking ahead, began planning the next steps. He knew that the officers' actions could not go unchecked, and that documenting everything would be crucial. He wanted to ensure that justice was served, not out of anger, but to protect his family and prevent similar incidents from happening to others. Even as they reached home, the family remained connected, comforting each other and discussing what had happened. The father explained that while some people act unfairly, it was important to stay calm, gather evidence, and take the proper steps to hold them accountable. The family felt a sense of unity and strength, knowing that they had faced a difficult situation together and handled it with courage and composure. They were determined to turn this frightening encounter into a story of resilience and justice, ready to take careful action in the days to come. After the tense encounter at the grocery store, the family returned home, still processing what had just happened. The children sat quietly in the living room, hugging stuffed animals and looking to their parents for reassurance. The mother gently held them close, explaining that sometimes people act unfairly and that they did nothing wrong. The father, an experienced FBI agent, sat down with the family, taking a deep breath, and began discussing what they should do next. He wanted to ensure his family felt safe and understood the situation, while also preparing to take responsible action against the officers' behavior. He explained that the first step was to document everything in detail. Every word, every gesture, every movement of the officers had to be recorded. While at the store, he had discreetly captured video footage on his phone, which would serve as clear evidence of the confrontation. The family worked together, recounting the event from each person's perspective. The children described how scared they felt when the officers approached, while the mother explained what she saw and heard. The father carefully noted all details, making sure to include exact times and descriptions of the officers' behavior. The father then spoke about the importance of staying calm and strategic. He reminded the family that acting out of anger could create unnecessary risk, so they would approach the situation with caution and careful planning. He reassured them that fairness and justice could be achieved without escalating tension. This explanation helped the children feel more secure, understanding that their parents had control of the situation. Over the next few days, the father began to reach out to appropriate authorities. He drafted a formal complaint to the police department, clearly detailing the incident and attaching the video evidence. He made sure to provide facts, avoiding emotional language while still emphasizing the unfair treatment and intimidation they had faced. He also contacted Internal Affairs to ensure that the complaint would be taken seriously and that an investigation would begin. Throughout this process, he kept his family informed, explaining each step in simple language that even the children could understand. While the complaint was being processed, the father made sure to maintain a sense of normalcy at home. The children went back to school, the parents returned to their routines, and the family spent time together in the evenings. They cooked meals, shared stories, and tried to keep the atmosphere calm, despite the lingering tension from the incident. The father believed that maintaining stability was crucial, especially for the children, who needed to feel safe and supported. As the days passed, the father also reached out to neighbors and friends who had witnessed the incident at the store. Some had discreetly recorded the officer's behavior, and others were willing to provide statements supporting the family's account. With multiple perspectives and evidence, the father ensured that the story would be backed by facts, not just personal recollection. This also helped the family feel that they were not alone, and that their experience had been unfair and visible to others. During this time, the father reflected on the officer's behavior. He noticed patterns of intimidation and bias that went beyond the immediate encounter. His experience in law enforcement helped him understand the seriousness of the situation and the potential impact if such behavior was left unchallenged. He shared this understanding with his spouse, explaining that their response could prevent similar situations from happening to other families. This gave the family a sense of purpose, transforming their fear and frustration into determination. The father also prepared his family for possible outcomes. He explained that the officers might deny their actions, downplay the situation, or try to shift blame. He taught the children that not everyone behaves fairly, but that standing up for what is right, calmly and responsibly, is always important. The mother added reassurance, telling the children that their courage and composure during the incident had been remarkable, and that they had acted correctly throughout. Throughout this period, the father maintained careful records. He wrote down every call he made to the police department and Internal Affairs, every conversation with witnesses, and every step of the complaint process. He also organized the video evidence, labeling important clips to make it easy to present a clear and concise case. This organization gave the family confidence, knowing that their efforts were methodical and well prepared. The family also received support from the local community. Neighbors and friends expressed concern, checked in to see how they were doing, and offered advice on navigating the complaint process. Some shared similar experiences, emphasizing that bias and unfair treatment were unfortunately common. The father encouraged these conversations, reminding the family that community support was essential for overcoming injustice. As the investigation began, the father worked closely with Internal Affairs and other authorities, providing all necessary evidence and answering questions thoroughly. The officers who confronted the family were placed on administrative leave during the investigation, a move that reassured the family that the matter was being taken seriously. The father remained calm and professional, focusing on facts and evidence, while also ensuring that his family felt safe and supported throughout the process. During this time, the children asked many questions, curious about what would happen next. The father explained that the investigation might take time, but that fairness and justice would ultimately prevail. He emphasized that their role was to be honest, patient, and to support each other as a family. This guidance helped the children process their emotions, turning fear into understanding and resilience. The family also discussed ways to protect themselves in the future. The father taught the children how to stay calm in tense situations, how to observe details, and how to seek help when necessary. These lessons were practical, empowering the children without instilling fear. The mother reinforced these teachings, creating a supportive environment where the children could ask questions and feel safe expressing their concerns. As the days turned into weeks, the father's careful and methodical approach began to show results. The complaint gained attention within the police department, and the investigation proceeded with clear evidence in hand. The officers' behavior was documented and undeniable, and their attempts to intimidate or manipulate were apparent in the records and video footage. The family's calm and organized response ensured that the focus remained on the officers' misconduct, not on the family's reactions during the incident. The father continued to encourage his family to stay connected and positive. They spent evenings discussing the importance of fairness, respect, and courage, and shared stories about people who had stood up against injustice. The children, inspired by these stories and by their parents' actions, began to understand the power of calm and thoughtful action in the face of unfairness. In the meantime, the father also communicated with local community organizations and advocacy groups. He shared his experience, hoping that it could help others who might face similar situations. He was careful to focus on facts, evidence, and practical advice, emphasizing that staying calm and documenting every detail was crucial. These connections provided additional support and guidance for the family, reinforcing their confidence that they were taking the right steps. Throughout this process, the family's bond grew stronger. They relied on each other for emotional support and reassurance, discussing their feelings openly and honestly. The children felt proud of how they had handled the situation, and the parents felt relief knowing they had acted with integrity and care. The father's calm and strategic approach, combined with the mother's emotional support, created a balanced and resilient family unit. As the investigation continued, the family reflected on the incident at the grocery store and the lessons learned. They understood that bias and unfair treatment could appear anywhere, but that courage, preparation, and calm action could make a real difference. The father reminded them that standing up for what is right, even when it is difficult or intimidating, was a powerful way to create change. The mother added that the family's unity and support for each other was equally important in overcoming challenges. By the end of this period, the family felt a renewed sense of purpose. They had faced a frightening encounter and had responded with courage, composure, and careful planning. The father's strategic approach and the mother's emotional support had protected the children and ensured that the family's experience would lead to accountability and justice. The children, though initially scared, now understood the importance of standing up for themselves and others in a safe and thoughtful manner. The family's story began to spread quietly through their community. Friends, neighbors, and witnesses shared the account, emphasizing the father's calm and effective response. The family became an example of how knowledge, preparation, and unity could turn a frightening and unfair encounter into an opportunity for justice and accountability. Their experience inspired others to document and report incidents of bias and misconduct, showing that standing up calmly and strategically could create real change. Through it all, the family maintained their focus on what truly mattered: their safety, their unity, and their commitment to fairness. They knew that the road ahead might still have challenges, but they felt empowered by their ability to act responsibly, to gather evidence, and to hold those in power accountable. Their experience at the grocery store, once a source of fear and tension, had transformed into a story of resilience, courage, and hope for the future. After taking time to process the events and gather their thoughts, the father knew it was time to take the next step. He had carefully documented everything that had happened in the grocery store, collected witness statements, and organized video footage. Now he needed to make sure that the officers responsible for harassing his family faced consequences. He sat down with his spouse and children, explaining that the next phase would involve working with authorities to ensure justice was served. The children, still processing the fear from the incident, listened closely, their trust in their father evident as they clung to his calm presence. The father began by filing a formal complaint with the police department, submitting all evidence and a detailed account of the encounter. He made certain that the report focused on facts, the officers' actions, their words, and the threatening tone they had used. He avoided emotional exaggeration, knowing that clarity and precision would strengthen the case. The Internal Affairs Division received the complaint and confirmed that it would be investigated thoroughly. The father also provided witness statements, including those from other shoppers who had recorded the officers' behavior on their phones. Each statement aligned with the family's account, providing further credibility. While waiting for the department to begin their formal investigation, the father remained engaged and proactive. He contacted additional witnesses, neighbors, and friends who had seen parts of the interaction or had heard about it afterward. Some offered to provide statements or corroborate the timeline. The father kept detailed notes of each communication, carefully cataloging them to create a clear, organized record of the unfolding events. His methodical approach ensured that when the time came, the evidence would be ready for a thorough review. The father also took steps to educate the children on what was happening. He explained in simple terms that the officers had acted unfairly and that it was important to follow the proper process to hold them accountable. He reminded the children that their safety and well-being were the most important priorities, but that standing up for justice was equally important. The mother supported this by encouraging open conversations and allowing the children to express their feelings without fear. This helped the children process their fear, anger, and confusion, turning these emotions into understanding and resilience. Over the next few days, the father communicated with internal affairs officials, providing additional evidence and answering questions. He maintained a calm and professional demeanor throughout, knowing that any sign of agitation could be used against the family or complicate the investigation. He ensured that every piece of evidence, from video footage to written statements, was properly submitted and accounted for. The investigators acknowledged the thoroughness of the documentation, noting that the family's detailed approach would make it easier to establish the officers' misconduct. The family also began to receive support from their community. Neighbors, friends, and local advocates expressed concern and offered guidance on navigating the investigation process. Some shared personal stories of similar encounters, while others offered to testify or provide additional evidence if needed. This network of support gave the family strength and reassurance that they were not alone in confronting injustice. The children, observing their parents' calm and strategic actions, began to understand the importance of standing up for what is right in a careful and measured way. As the investigation progressed, the father carefully reviewed the officers' past records. His experience in law enforcement allowed him to recognize patterns of bias and misconduct. He discovered that these officers had multiple complaints filed against them in previous years, suggesting a history of targeting minority individuals unfairly. This information was carefully documented and submitted to the Internal Affairs Division. The father knew that presenting a clear factual pattern of behavior would strengthen the case and increase the likelihood of meaningful consequences for the officers. While the investigation continued, the father remained attentive to the family's emotional well-being. He encouraged the children to continue with their daily routines and hobbies, reinforcing a sense of normalcy and stability. The mother organized activities at home to keep the children engaged and comforted, from simple arts and crafts to storytelling and cooking. Together, the family created an environment that was safe and nurturing, balancing the tension of the investigation with warmth and care. The father also focused on preparing for potential outcomes. He explained that the investigation might take time and that the officers could respond defensively. He wanted his family to understand that persistence, patience, and adherence to the proper process were crucial. He reassured the children that their role was to remain honest, stay calm, and support one another. The mother reinforced these lessons, reminding the children that their courage and composure during the grocery store encounter had been remarkable, and that they had acted correctly throughout. As weeks passed, the Internal Affairs team began interviewing witnesses and reviewing the submitted evidence. The father was meticulous in providing clear and concise explanations, pointing out specific moments in the video footage and highlighting inconsistencies in the officers' behavior. The investigators recognized the thoroughness of the documentation and noted that the family's calm, organized approach had made it easier to understand the sequence of events. The father remained in close contact with the investigators, answering questions promptly and providing additional context when needed. The family's patience and preparation began to pay off. The Internal Affairs Division found sufficient evidence to place the officers on administrative leave, pending further review. This decision reassured the family that their concerns were being taken seriously and that the officers' actions would not go unchecked. The father explained the significance of this step to the children, helping them understand that accountability was beginning to take place. The children, though still cautious, felt a growing sense of relief knowing that justice was in motion. Throughout this time, the father also reached out to local community organizations and advocacy groups. He shared the family's experience and provided guidance on how others could respond to similar encounters. The focus was on educating the public about their rights, the importance of documentation, and the power of calm, strategic action. These connections provided additional support and insight, further reinforcing the family's confidence that they were handling the situation effectively. The family continued to reflect on the grocery store incident and its broader implications. They recognized that bias and unfair treatment could appear anywhere, but that standing up with knowledge, composure, and a strategic plan could make a real difference. The father encouraged discussions about fairness, justice, and resilience, helping the children understand that they could influence positive change even in difficult circumstances. The mother emphasized the importance of family unity, explaining that their strength as a family would help them face any challenges ahead. During this period, the father carefully reviewed every piece of evidence multiple times, ensuring that nothing was overlooked. He cross-referenced witness statements, rewatched video footage, and compiled a comprehensive record of the officer's actions. His methodical approach demonstrated professionalism and attention to detail, further strengthening the case. The children, observing their father's dedication, began to appreciate the importance of patience, preparation, and careful planning when addressing injustice. The family also remained engaged with their community, attending local meetings and participating in discussions about police accountability and fairness. They shared their experience to raise awareness, emphasizing the importance of documenting encounters and standing up for one's rights. Their story resonated with others who had faced similar challenges, creating a network of support and advocacy that extended beyond the immediate situation. As the investigation continued, the family felt a growing sense of empowerment. They had faced a frightening encounter, remained calm under pressure, and taken strategic action to ensure accountability. The father's experience, the mother's emotional support, and the children's trust and courage combined to create a resilient and unified family. The father emphasized that their actions had already made a difference, showing that standing up responsibly could protect not only themselves but others who might face similar situations in the future. By the end of this phase, the family had established a clear path forward. They had submitted comprehensive evidence, engaged witnesses, communicated with internal affairs, and received support from their community. The officers responsible for the grocery store encounter were under review, and accountability was beginning to take shape. The family felt a sense of purpose and confidence knowing that their careful, calm, and strategic actions had set the stage for justice. Through this process, the children learned valuable lessons about resilience, fairness, and the importance of standing up for what is right. The parents, proud of how their family had handled the situation, continued to emphasize the significance of composure, careful observation, and methodical action. Together, the family had transformed a frightening and unfair encounter into an opportunity for learning, growth, and the pursuit of justice. The investigation into the officers' conduct began to gain momentum, and the family could feel that their efforts were making a real impact. The father, with his experience in law enforcement, continued to work methodically, ensuring that every piece of evidence was submitted properly and that nothing was left unaddressed. He reviewed witness statements, video footage, and written accounts repeatedly, checking for any inconsistencies and making sure the investigators had everything they needed. The family was determined to see justice done, not out of anger, but to hold those responsible accountable for their actions. Meanwhile, the children continued with their school and activities, trying to maintain a sense of normalcy despite the lingering tension. The mother helped them process their emotions, explaining that fear and anger were natural reactions, but that it was important to focus on positive actions and calm responses. The father reinforced this by discussing how their careful and patient approach had already started to bring consequences for the officers. The children began to understand that standing up for what is right often required patience and careful planning. As the investigation unfolded, internal affairs reached out to additional witnesses and store employees to corroborate the family's account. Many shoppers had quietly recorded parts of the encounter, capturing the officers' aggressive behavior and biased treatment. The father ensured that all these pieces of evidence were properly submitted, creating a comprehensive record that was difficult to dispute. This careful documentation strengthened the case and made it clear that the officer's conduct was unacceptable. The family's story started to draw attention within their community. Neighbors and friends expressed support, sharing their admiration for how calmly the family had handled the situation. Some community leaders reached out to offer guidance and assistance, reinforcing the importance of taking responsible action against injustice. The father encouraged these connections, knowing that a supportive community could provide both emotional strength and additional advocacy during the investigation. As the weeks passed, the father also reviewed the officer's past records and previous complaints. He discovered that there were multiple incidents of biased behavior toward minority individuals, indicating a pattern that could not be ignored. He carefully compiled this information and submitted it to Internal Affairs, highlighting how the officer's actions in the grocery store were consistent with past misconduct. This added a crucial layer to the investigation, demonstrating that the behavior was not an isolated incident, but part of a troubling trend. Throughout this period, the family maintained their routines and supported each other. They spent evenings discussing fairness, justice, and resilience, using their experience as an opportunity to teach the children valuable life lessons. The father explained that knowledge, calmness, and preparation were powerful tools when facing unfair treatment. The mother encouraged the children to express their thoughts and feelings openly, creating a safe environment where they could process their emotions without fear. The father also stayed in close communication with Internal Affairs, providing additional evidence and answering questions as needed. He remained professional and composed, avoiding any emotional reactions that could complicate the investigation. His strategic approach ensured that the focus remained on the officer's misconduct rather than the family's responses during the encounter. The investigators acknowledged the thoroughness of the documentation and recognized that the family's careful actions had made their job easier. The family also took time to reflect on the broader implications of the incident. They understood that bias and unfair treatment could appear anywhere, and that standing up for what is right often required courage and persistence. The father explained that their actions could help prevent similar incidents from happening to others, turning a frightening experience into an opportunity for positive change. The children, inspired by their parents' example, began to see how calm and thoughtful action could influence outcomes and protect others. Community organizations and advocacy groups began to take notice of the family's story. They reached out to offer support, provide advice, and share resources on how to address bias and misconduct. The father welcomed this assistance, knowing that it could strengthen their case and provide additional avenues for accountability. The family also shared their experience with others, emphasizing the importance of documenting incidents, remaining calm, and taking responsible action to hold those in power accountable. As the investigation progressed, the officers involved were placed on administrative leave, signaling that their actions were being taken seriously. The father explained the significance of this step to the children, helping them understand that accountability was beginning to take place. The children, though still cautious, felt a growing sense of relief and reassurance. They understood that their parents' careful and methodical actions had set the stage for justice and that the officer's misconduct would not go unnoticed. The father continued to emphasize the importance of preparation and observation. He taught the children how to notice details, stay calm in tense situations, and gather information when necessary. These lessons were practical and empowering, helping the children feel more confident and aware without instilling fear. The mother reinforced these teachings, providing emotional support and creating a nurturing environment for learning and growth. The family also continued to engage with their community, attending meetings and participating in discussions about police accountability and fairness. They shared their experience and offered advice on how to respond to similar situations. Their story resonated with others, creating a network of support and advocacy that extended beyond their immediate neighborhood. This connection to the community provided additional reassurance and motivation for the family to remain patient and focused on the investigation. During this time, the father also worked on preparing a clear and organized presentation of all evidence. He reviewed video footage, witness statements, and records of communication with the police department and Internal Affairs. He made sure that everything was labeled, documented, and easy to understand, anticipating that this would be crucial if the case progressed to formal disciplinary action or legal proceedings. His attention to detail demonstrated professionalism and strengthened the family's position. The mother continued to support the family emotionally, helping the children process their feelings and maintain a sense of stability. She encouraged them to engage in hobbies, play, and school activities, providing a sense of normalcy despite the ongoing investigation. The father reminded the children that their courage and composure during the grocery store encounter had been commendable, and that they had done everything right. This reassurance helped the children feel secure and proud of how they had handled the situation. As the investigation moved forward, Internal Affairs conducted interviews, reviewed evidence, and consulted with witnesses. The officer's behavior was scrutinized, and the pattern of bias became increasingly clear. The father remained patient and composed, providing additional information when requested and ensuring that the investigation stayed focused on the facts. His calm and strategic approach continued to set the tone, demonstrating that responsible action could lead to meaningful outcomes. Throughout this process, the family reflected on their experience and the lessons learned. They understood that facing unfair treatment required courage, preparation, and patience. The father emphasized that standing up for what is right, even when intimidating or uncomfortable, was an essential part of protecting oneself and others. The mother highlighted the importance of family unity, explaining that their collective strength had helped them navigate a difficult situation successfully. By the end of this phase, the family had achieved several important milestones. They had submitted comprehensive evidence, engaged witnesses, and received community support. The officers involved were on administrative leave, and the investigation was moving forward with clear documentation of misconduct. The family felt a growing sense of empowerment and purpose, knowing that their calm, strategic actions had created a path toward accountability. The children had learned valuable lessons about fairness, resilience, and the importance of standing up for what is right. The parents, proud of how their family had handled the situation, continued to emphasize the significance of composure, careful observation, and thoughtful action. Together, the family had turned a frightening and unfair encounter into an opportunity for learning, growth, and justice, setting an example for their community and beyond. They were ready to see the final steps of accountability take place and to continue advocating for fairness and respect wherever it was needed. The investigation into the officers' actions finally reached a point where real accountability was beginning to take shape. The father, having spent weeks collecting evidence, documenting witness statements, and communicating with Internal Affairs, had ensured that the family's side of the story was presented clearly and professionally. The officers were now facing scrutiny that would determine the future of their careers. The father knew that his careful, methodical approach had brought them to this moment, and that his family could finally see the results of their patience and strategic action.